Are you left feeling frustrated and annoyed because you just can't put an end to your acid reflux symptoms? Have you tried eliminating all the common triggers to acid reflux and you're still experiencing acid reflux symptoms? Now I hear you, because I felt the exact same. It's been more than 20 years navigating this chronic condition, trying to find those solutions that actually work. In this video, I'm going to share with you some other food groups. Now these go beyond the 7 foods that I think you should try your utmost best to avoid consuming. These foods are 5 food groups that I think could potentially be holding you back from trying to put an end to your acid reflux symptoms. Now these are foods that may not be common across the board. There's something that I had to do a lot of trial and error with in order to identify whether these food groups work or not. They may be specific to me and few other individuals, or maybe many other individuals. These foods are the ones that you need to test out and see whether they agree with you or don't agree with you. Use a trial and error based approach to try and identify whether these food groups are what is holding you back from healing your acid reflux. Now, some of you may need to avoid these foods in order to eliminate your acid reflux. Some of you may be able to tolerate these at certain points in time, and at other times when you consume it, it could result in an acid reflux reaction. I know for myself, oftentimes it depends on my emotional state and a whole host of other factors that also come into play. But generally speaking, these foods are known to give rise to an acid reflux symptom. So I'm no saint or guru when it comes to avoiding all these foods. I'm not like this guy standing on the top of the mountain saying I never ever touch these foods. I'm like a saint when it comes to not eating these foods at all. I'm just saying try and pick yourself up. If you may have those cheat days and you feel tempted to consume some of these foods that I'm going to mention to you today, try and get up and get back on the avoiding these foods as much as possible on that road to recovery, to try and keep yourself on this journey towards getting to that goal of eliminating or completely eradicating your acid reflux symptoms. Now, unfortunately, even though some of you may make a lot of progress with healing your acid reflux, you're going to find that when you do consume these aggressive foods, they're going to result in the acid reflux symptoms coming back, especially once you've eliminated the PPIs and you've gone on a totally natural based approach where you not taking any supplement or medication to help you digest these foods. Now, there are certain types of supplements that can work in order to facilitate the digestion and to relieve the acid reflux symptoms, and I'll cover those supplements and natural remedies in a later video. In this video, I want to focus on these 5 food groups that I think could be holding you back. So let's get right into it. Now, the first food that you may want to use a bit of trial and error and possibly eliminate is corn and all corn-based products. Now, the reason behind corn may be multifaceted. For some of you, I think the trial and error based approach to see whether when you consume corn or corn-based products, does it give you an acid reflux reaction? Doesn't it give you an acid reflux reaction? Now, I highly recommend that you do keep a diary and write down the foods, your emotional state at the time of consumption. Did it give you an acid reflux reaction? Did it not give you an acid reflux reaction? And those are going to help you understand whether these foods are problematic overall or only problematic when you're in an emotionally tense situation. So if you are going to cheat on these foods, you do it at a time when you know you're in the emotional state to be able to handle it, rather than being in a vulnerable state and then giving rise to acid reflux symptoms. Now, corn is a bit controversial because there are a number of theories out there that states that most corn, including the organic corn, is GMO. And is generally said to feed a lot of the pathogens and bacteria in our body. And one of the reasons why corn is suggested to be avoided, even if you're trying to just be healthy, try and eliminate corn from your diet in order to heal and stop the pathogens and bacteria in your body that's feeding off these food sources. So corn, I know it's challenging. I love Mexican food too, and I know Mexican food tends to be very rich in corn. It's also very popular in so many different jurisdictions. I know in South Africa, people love to eat something called pap. Now, pap is basically a corn meal, and it's a dietary staple in so many different households. So, corn is something that do a bit of trial and error. I know I can tolerate it generally at times when I'm not that stressed, but I don't recommend adding it to your diet on a daily basis. So the next item is potatoes, and I'm not talking about any potatoes, I'm talking about white potatoes specifically. Now this is very controversial because some of the healthy diets or mono-eating diets call for consumption of only white potatoes. So this is one where I think trial and error is going to come to play, because through an exercise of trial and error, you're going to be able to figure out whether these are a problem for you or they're not a problem for you. Now, when it comes to potatoes, you definitely don't want to be experimenting with deep fried potatoes or things that are just saturated in oil. Try steaming the potatoes or baking the potatoes and then consuming it, and still noticing whether you get an acid reflux reaction from it or not get an acid reflux reaction to it. Now, when it comes to potatoes, I grew up living on potatoes. It was a dietary staple in my household. And unfortunately, even though I love these foods so much, it's a challenge to consume it. But I do often cheat because, like I said, I love potatoes and I love certain meals that contain potatoes. So one of my favorite foods is dosas. And dosas have a filling which is generally, in most cases, it's a potato-based filling. And I do enjoy the potato-based filling specifically. So whenever I consume that, I need to be very mindful of making sure I take something to be able to facilitate my digestion, because potatoes, even when I have it just steamed, I have to be very conscious of it because it is often going to result in an acid reflux reaction. But it's not the same for everyone. There are people who suffer from acid reflux that potatoes works extremely well in their diet. So it's something that you're going to need to experiment with. Like I said, there are even times when my emotional state is so positive and I'm so vibrant that when I do consume potatoes in that emotional state, I'll have no acid reflux reaction. Other times when I consume potatoes, even though I'm in a neutral state and I observe that there isn't much difference, I'll just get an acid reflux reaction. So it is something that you need to use a bit of trial and error to figure out whether it's something that works for you or it doesn't work for you. I'm also interested to hear from you whether this works. So please drop it down in the comment section below. Does potatoes actually trigger an acid reflux reaction? And I'm talking about white potatoes. Sweet potatoes are absolutely no problem for me. But hey, you may need to experiment with those foods and see if it's problematic or not for you. But I'm really interested to hear from you whether potatoes causes you acid reflux symptoms. With that, let's go on to the next item. So the next item is rice and all other types of grains. Now, I mentioned rice specifically because I find rice tends to be very hard to digest. I often get an acid reflux reaction whenever I consume rice, and I'm talking about organic rice. I don't generally try and avoid all of the conventional foods, and I try to stick with organic in most cases because the conventional foods are often sprayed and laden with pesticides that will tend to aggravate a lot of your acid reflux symptoms, because all of these toxins end up feeding a lot of the pathogens and causing more havoc on your body. And that is why you generally want to avoid all the foods that are conventional, that you can't eliminate the pesticides from just washing it. If it's a food that you can eliminate the pesticides from just washing it, like think of avocados and things that don't absorb a lot of the pesticide content, then those are fine. But the ones that generally tend to end up saturating a lot of the pesticides, those are the ones you generally want to avoid. Now, I mentioned rice. I said rice is one of the ones that are really challenging to digest. What I used to do with rice, because I do tend to consume rice now and again, is I tend to soak it for very long periods of time so that I make it much more easier on the digestive system. But it's not a food that I generally try and consume every day. I try and have it on those rare occasions when I'm really craving rice. Not that I usually do crave rice, but whenever I feel like I need to consume rice, then I would soak it for prolonged periods in order to break it down and make it very much more easier on the digestive system. And the same goes with a lot of the other types of grains. Even though they may be gluten-free, they may still be hard on your digestive system. So you may want to try and avoid these other grains as well, and keep a diary and notice what your acid reflux reactions are from consuming these other grains. Now, there are some grains that tend to be well tolerated But also, once again, I don't recommend consuming these grains every day. They are still on the harder to digest on the scale of digestion. They're not the easiest foods to digest. So some of these grains that are a bit more easier on the digestive system compared to grains such as rice are like quinoa. Quinoa tends to be a little less aggressive than some of these other grains and tend to be a bit more well tolerated. The other one is buckwheat. Especially if you're consuming buckwheat, make sure to soak it and sprout it. It makes it much more easier. Same goes with quinoa or any other grain. Just try and soak it and make sure that you're making it as easy as possible on your digestive system. If you have to be consuming these grains on a more routine basis, try and aim for the grains that are easiest to digest and go through the normal preparation process. Now, a lot of the soaking helps to eliminate the phytic acids, which is something which makes it so much harder to digest. By eliminating a lot of the phytic acid, it makes it easier. Same goes with nuts and seeds. If you are going to be consuming those, try and soak them. Be mindful, nuts and seeds can also be very challenging to digest, and I would often bucket them all in the same rice and greens and nuts category. Now, before I get into the next item, if any of this content is helpful to you, is providing some sort of benefit, I invite you to subscribe to my channel and join me on this journey, navigating mind, body, and soul wellness. Let's get into the next item. The next item is tofu. Now, tofu is very common among a lot of people that are following a vegan diet. I generally try to avoid tofu. And the reason is it's highly processed food. It's a highly processed food. It's not something that is very beneficial to your diet. If you must absolutely consume it, sure, but it's another one that requires a lot of trial and error as well. See if it's working for you. If it's not working for you, my preference generally is to try and avoid all processed foods. We know tofu is heavily processed, so it's one of the foods that you generally want to avoid. Soy is also a very challenging food to digest, so it's one that I would try and do my best to avoid. If you're consuming it on the rare occasion, that's okay, but try not to constantly consume or make it a dietary staple, because it is going to feed a lot of the pathogens in your body. It's also going to probably slow down your long-term healing just because of the nature of this food and the fact that a lot of the soy out there is GMO and it is very pesticide laden. So just be mindful. If you're consuming it, try and keep it to those rare occasions rather than making it a dietary staple. Because I know a lot of people who follow the vegan diet tend to make tofu a dietary staple and use it as a replacement to a lot of their meat-based products. So the final item is a controversial one, and it's one that some of you are going to hate me for saying this, but it's meat. Now, all forms of meat. I'm talking about seafood, I'm talking about poultry, all forms of meat. Now, the reason why I'm saying meat is generally a complex food to digest. It takes a lot of energy for our bodies to be able to break down this food. You need a lot of stomach acid to be able to digest it. Now, I'm not here to spin up some ethical argument against the consumption of meat or take you down that rabbit hole. I think it's everyone's individual decision whether you decide to eat it or not. I have no judgments over you for eating meat or not eating meat. It's up to you. It's individual choice that you need to make. I'm talking about it purely from the perspective of the acid reflux condition here. Now, when you consume meat, it generally tends to be very hard for the body to digest. And if your digestive system is weak, which is why a lot of us experience acid reflux symptoms, it is going to be so much more challenging to break down those foods. So often, if you need to and you absolutely must eat meat, I would highly recommend try and stick to the organic versions, try and stick to the natural versions, a wild caught fish and things of that nature that aren't infused with a lot of antibiotics and chemicals. You want to make sure that the food that you are eating as close to natural as possible, that you eliminate any causative factors for additional inflammation or additional burden on your body to have to take in. Because remember, when you're consuming that food is becoming part of you. If you're consuming something that's laden with pesticides and antibiotics, you're basically injecting those same substances within your body when you consume those types of foods. So just be mindful of that. Try and stay away from processed meats as well if you absolutely must consume meat. But generally, those are my foods that I think are potentially holding you back from putting an end to your acid reflux symptoms, or at least really moving forward on your journey to healing acid reflux. It's not easy to eliminate a lot of these foods. I know it can be challenging. I still do cheat now and then and try and have potatoes and even corn for that matter. There are times when I consume these foods. I still get acid reflux reactions whenever I consume these foods, but I'm trying to be more mindful, more vigilant, and trying to bring in those natural supplements that can help me to digest a lot of these foods. So if you like this video, please do drop down your comments in the comment section below. Share it with others that are going through or experiencing similar symptoms, and please don't forget to subscribe. In my next video, I'm going to share with you the natural remedies and supplements that can be used, as well as how can you go about transitioning off PPIs. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.